Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Colorado LTAP Talk, LTAP Tailgate Talk. Today, we are talking about oxyacetylene safety, specifically cutting torches. We're talking about it because torches are a common tool used for road maintenance. You all are using them. You probably all have them in your shop. They create a flame that's around 3,000 degrees, and they are one of the most hazardous tools in the industry. Never, ever attempt to use torches until you've been trained. And just for the record, this tailgate talk is not training. It's a safety reminder. Training should include practice under the supervision of a torch user, a qualified torch user. The PPE, the proper PPE for oxyacetylene use is cotton clothing. Do not use polyester. Polyester burns and adheres to the skin. It melts onto the skin while it's burning. Wear clean clothes, no oils or flammables. Use the gauntlet style gloves that go all the way up your arm. Use ANSI approved safety glasses and number 5 minimum shade lenses if you can get those. Use hearing protection and a welding cap or leather sleeve shirt or jacket. That's going to cover you. That's going to protect you as much as possible. The gas fumes will produce infrared radiation that can harm your eyes and skin. So it's really important to adhere to the PPE requirements and cover yourself with leather if you can as much as possible, even your head. So before ever starting the torch, create a flame-free circle, free of combustibles, right? Because flying slag will cause a fire. Have an ABC rated fire extinguisher nearby. Make sure that it works. And yeah, once you see a fire, that's not the time to decide to figure out if your fire extinguisher is working. Try not to let any flames or flaming metal land on concrete, can crack it and send pieces flying around you like shrapnel. And have a partner. Always have a partner. A partner can spot flames around you and assist if you're having any problems. Set up your job on a clean, hard metal surface or on bare ground. Never ever cut torches on a wooden or plastic surface, and be aware that some metals like lead paint, chromate primers, zinc plating, these will create toxic fumes, and you may be required to wear a respirator and or uh, have some kind of ventilation. Know what's underneath something if you're cutting it through a pile, and clear away anything that might be flammable at all. Um, like you see in the guy with the rebar, make sure you know what's under that rebar. Sometimes leaves, paper, bits of debris can get under there and cause a fire, and in that situation you might not even see it until it was already too late. All right, let's talk about the gases for a minute. Oxygen is a non-flammable gas, and I know most people think that oxygen burns like crazy, but it doesn't. What it does is combine with the fuel to heat for the cutting, so that it oxidizes, right? It's shipped in high pressure cylinders at pressures around 3,000 foot-pounds per square inch. Oxygen does not burn by itself. It needs something else, in this case, acetylene, and this is the primary fuel for oxyacetylene cutting. Acetylene is shipped in special containers designed to keep the gases dissolved. The cylinders are packaged with porous material, diatomaceous earth is what it is, basically a special kind of dirt, and then filled to 50% capacity with acetone. The acetone neutralizes the volatility of the acetylene. All right, oxyacetylene uses combustion as a basic tool, right? And when used properly, it's very, controlled, and it can be extremely productive, but it can also be extremely destructive if it's not used in the correct environment or if it's used improperly. The first photo on the upper right, on the upper left, is a burning barrel that no one checked before they began cutting. It contained a toxic flammable substance that ultimately took the life of the person that was cutting it. And next to it, the second one in the upper right is labeled, actually, online when I found the pictures. It's labeled dumb guy cutting gas bottles, and that pretty much says it all. Why would you use a torch to cut gas bottles? Um, the photo in the bottom left is a piece of shrapnel from the explosion of a 55-gallon drum that someone wanted to cut the lid off. If you do not know what is inside, do not use a torch to cut the lid off. The piece shown here killed the guy cutting it, and another smaller piece killed a innocent bystander. The last photo on the far left, I don't know how much of that you can see, but it is a memorial. It reminds us that you do not want to see yourself in a tailgate talk as the topic of conversation. It says, "Mourn for the dead. It's too late for them, and fight for the living." And that means sharing the lessons we've learned from their death. Right? I know that gets a little bit morbid, but you guys needed to hear that because you're working with some very dangerous combustible materials here. Okay. Never, ever, ever allow oxygen to contact grease, oil, or other flammable substances. Although oxygen itself will not burn, these substances become highly explosive and they can ignite and burn violently in the presence of oxygen. So that's just the warning right there. Okay, here is a typical portable cutting rig, right, including the gauges and the regulators. Here are the steps to use them safely, and you can see every single piece that I'm going to talk about there just about outlined in that photograph. Well, most of that photograph except where my head is. Remove the protective cap from the cylinders and inspect it for grease and or oil or damage, right? The protective cap would be the metal cover that's usually on the top of those bottles when the regulators are not in place. Clean out the cylinder valve seats, right, where you put that protective cap, and remove any dust or moisture. Inspect the regulator for grease or oil. Make sure the regulator key is turned off and then connect the regulator. Do steps 1 through 4 on both gas bottles. Stand away from the regulator key or handles and open the valves. Oxygen valve should be opened completely. Acetylene valve should be opened partially, a quarter to a half a turn. Purge both bottles. Right? Open the oxygen valve on the torch and turn on the oxygen regulator and adjust it to 40 psi about, but never greater than 50 psi max. Close the oxygen valve on the torch. Open the acetylene valve on the torch and turn the acetylene regulator to adjust to 3 to 5 psi, never more than 15 psi. Never more than 15 psi. Close the acetylene valve on the torch. Okay, now you've got them set up. Let's talk about lighting the torch, right? So light the torch with a friction striker. Never use a cigarette lighter or a flame lighter or anything else but a friction lighter, a striker, to light the torch. And to do that, the striker should be about a quarter to a half an inch away from the tip of the torch. Adjust the flame back down, almost touching the tip of the torch, and you can see here what you're striving for most of the time is a neutral flame, the flame at the top, flame A. And then slowly open the oxygen valve to adjust it to where it's all the way back almost to touching the tip. A neutral flame is equal parts oxygen and acetylene, so that's a balanced flame, and it's used for cutting mild steel and stainless steel. A carburizing flame, that's the second one there, flame B, that is a reducing flame, and that has an excess amount of acetylene. And it's used for cutting carbon steel and cast iron. And the last one, the oxidizing flame, you guessed it, has an excess amount of oxygen, and it's used for cutting things like copper and zinc. And remember, if you're using anything like that, you may require a respirator. Now you're able to apply the flame to the piece being cut. Be ready for the cut piece to fall, roll, or bounce once they're separated from the piece you're cutting it from. Once you finish, you need to turn off the torches, right? First, close the oxygen valve, then close the acetylene valve. Oxygen is the most volatile gas here. You might think it was acetylene, but oxygen is the is the biggest hazard here. So do everything to that first, and then close the acetylene valve. The valves must be closed when being moved, so never ever move these bottles when the valves are open or left unattended, and close them when the task is completed. After closing, though, you need to purge the system again. So open the oxygen valve on the torch, bleed off the oxygen, close the valve, and then do the same thing on the acetylene torch. Open the valve, bleed off the acetylene, and close the valve. Safe storage of these bottles includes storing them at ground level, upright with the valves closed and the cylinder caps in place. Don't ever store acetylene horizontally. Don't store any of these bottles horizontally, but particularly acetylene. Make sure they're securely restrained by individual straps or chains. You can see all of these here are chained, and they're probably sectioned off by the type of gas that's in the bottle. Make sure they're protected from any kind of an impact. So you see they've got these nice heavy-duty fences between them and ahead of them. Preferably, they should be stored outside in a well-ventilated area and include a secure area that's been fenced off and unable to be accessed by unauthorized people. Make sure that it's stored away from potential ignition sources, including static electricity. So watch out for where you're putting it and what is nearby and what's happening nearby. And they should have placards and warning signage as well. And it doesn't show in this picture, but I'm sure they're probably on there since this came off the OSHA website. And it should be near first aid equipment, SDS sheets, emergency instructions. That should be somewhere nearby or accessible right away. Okay, so the key points today: you're working with highly combustible gases and training is required. Keep all types of flammable items away from the work area. Follow the steps to set up and break down the torches and store the gas bottles. And the consequences for not properly following the directions could lead to an explosion and injure innocent bystanders. And those bystanders could be your coworkers. You can find more information on the NL Tapa Tailgate Talk website, the Oxy-acetylene cutting safety PowerPoint that I took some of the information from, and the bottom one is SlideServe, and there was great information on some of these links, so feel free to check them out. Thanks again for attending the Colorado LTAP Tailgate Talk on cutting safety and torch safety. I hope you found the topic helpful and that you are able to incorporate it into your daily routine. Take care, guys. See you next time.